Welcome back, everyone, to the cigar smoke-filled back room. I am Doug with Tusk Consulting, tuskconsulting@gmail.com, tuskconsulting@gmail.com. If you are a pro-gun Republican and you are looking for political consulting help in your race, drop me an email. I'll be glad to help. If you are not a pro-gun Republican, I don't want to work with you. So, in today's installment of the video series of things that are not talked about enough in politics, or at least not honestly enough, we are going to be discussing endorsements. And before we go any further, those of you who are wondering, this is a 5 Vegas cask strength cigar. No, they're not sponsors to the program or anything, but if they drop me an email, tuskconsulting@gmail.com, perhaps I could be. We'll work some out. Anyway, endorsements, a lot of people think they're very important. Some people think they're very unimportant. But let's really dive into what endorsements are, what you can do with them, how much they matter, etc. So let's start by defining what an endorsement is. An endorsement is when someone or some organization comes out and publicly supports you. I get candidates all the time that come to me and they say, hey, Doug, former commissioner so-and-so and mayor so-and-so and congressman so-and-so, man, they are 200% behind my campaign. They're all for me. Let's go. And I say, okay, that's cool. Glad to hear that. Did they sign a letter of endorsement? What do you mean, Doug? Unless you have a way to prove that someone is supporting you, you do not have an endorsement. The most common and smartest thing to do is to have a form letter ready for anybody that says they're supporting your campaign. I, Congressman blah, 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 hereby declare my endorsement for Jane Doe for the office of dog catcher, dated this date, whatever. They sign that and say, you have my endorsement. Now you've got a written record that they are supporting you. That is an endorsement. You can also have it done by a press release. That's fine. A little bit more casual is if somebody says they support you, ask them for a check, right? Say, okay, cool. Could you write me a $5 check? You don't have to ask for a lot of, you don't have to ask for $100, $1,000, whatever. $5 check then. Because remember, we talked about with hard money, campaign finance reports are public records. So if somebody writes you a $5 check, now there is a record that shows that this person wrote you a contribution check and you can prove it. So now when you go around and say, hey, Congressman so-and-so supports me for this office, and someone challenges you on it, you can go, well, here's the record. I got the receipt, right? Boom, right there. He supports me monetarily. Now, that's not as airtight as the form letter I just mentioned earlier, or even a press release, because there's nothing stopping that congressman from writing both you and your opponent a check, is it? And a lot of organizations, by the way, do that. So while the check writing thing is better than nothing, it's not as good as it could be. So that's how you get an endorsement. Don't just say, well, verbally they said this. That doesn't cut it. You need it in writing. At absolute minimum, you need a monetary contribution that you can disclose on a campaign finance report, but preferably you get a form letter signed by them or a press release. Why do we pursue endorsements? Well, it depends on what you want to do with it, because having an endorsement in and of itself isn't anything unless people know about it or are willing to do something with it. So when candidates come to me and say, hey, Doug, I got an endorsement, my answer is always, okay, so now what? What are you going to do with that endorsement? And there's a lot of things you can do with it. The absolute minimum level of value for an endorsement is the following. If you get an endorsement, it freezes out your opponent in the race from being endorsed. Now, I say that there are some organizations, believe it or not, that will do things like dual endorsements or whatever. I think those are kind of silly. I'm of the opinion that if you have two people that are equally good on it, you have, say, a single issue group, a pro-gun group, whatever, your local state level pro-gun group, and they decide to make endorsements, If they have two identically good candidates on an issue, the way I see it is they shouldn't make an endorsement in the race then. If one of them is slightly better than the other one, okay, fine. If one's a lot better than the other one, well, definitely, right? But if they're actually equal, let's say there's a race for state senate, and you got two state reps running for it, and they've both got the same 100% pro-gun record. Well, making an endorsement of one, not the other, kind of seems unfair, right? Well, the guy did just as good a job. Every time you asked him, he voted the right way. What are you punishing one guy for and rewarding the other guy for? And this is where some groups will do these dual endorsements, which I'm not a huge fan of. But most groups will simply not endorse in a race where you have two equally good opponents. Regardless, most of the time, organizations that only endorse one candidate. So if you get the endorsement, your opponent doesn't, and it freezes them out. That is the absolute baseline of the value of an endorsement. Okay. But what else can we use an endorsement for? Number one, we can use it to raise money. Our last video was about hard money, the money that campaign committees actually raise. So if someone or some entity endorses you, you can ask them, hey, would you write me a check, right? Hey, would you host a fundraiser for me? Maybe they do a trap shooting event, or they have an event down at the bowling alley, or maybe if it's a particularly wealthy member, pillar of the community, whatever, you say, hey, would you please have a reception at your home for you and your wealthy friends? And I'll be there and give my stump speech and hobnob and, eat the cheese and crackers and so forth. All that's great because campaigns are expensive and you need the money. So endorsements that come with the ability to fundraise, very nice. And it might be that your endorser doesn't even think about that. So if someone says they endorse you and they write they sign a little form letter, whatever, ask them, hey, thank you so much for your support. Always thank them. So then say, would you please consider hosting a fundraiser for me so that people can, see that I'm doing this, that I'm, making headway and I'm taking the campaign seriously. Because if you're not raising money, you're not being very serious about your campaign. So that's one way we can benefit from an endorsement. What's another way? Especially with first-time candidates, there is a certain amount of validity that the candidate can accrue by receiving an endorsement. What do I mean by that? If you've never run for office before, now you're running for state rep, and a pro-gun group endorses you, well, now, if you've never been in public office before, there's no track record for people to investigate. If you've already been in public office, you're an incumbent, or you've held some different office, whatever, people can go and look at your track record, right? They can look at your voting record. They can look at the decisions you made, and when the hard decisions came, what did you do? Did you stand up? Did you fold like a cheap suit? What did you do? But for first-time candidates, there's no track record, or at least first time for maybe that level of office, right? Maybe you're a state rep now and you're running for Congress. Different, federal issues aren't the same necessarily as state issues. So you can, when you get endorsements, especially from single issue groups, it gives validity to your claim that you are good on that issue. If you convince your local sportsman's club that you're good on the gun issue, then other people are likely to believe that you really are good on the gun issue because you have the endorsement of the sportsman's club. Okay, cool. Same thing with the life issue, or business groups want to endorse. You say, well, I'm a friend of business, right? Well, prove it. How can you, right? If you've never been in office, you've never taken a vote on streamlining regulations or what have you. How do you prove that you're a friend of business? Well, if the local business groups come out and endorse your candidacy, now you can say, see, it says right here, I am a friend of business. This gives validity. Additionally, that's entities, organizations. Additionally, when you have prominent members of the public come out to support you, prominent individuals, other office holders endorse you, maybe someone's retiring, right? And they come out and endorse you. They say, you, Jane Doe, you would be great at this job. And I know because I'm doing this job right now and I know what it takes. And by golly, I think Jane Doe would just be wonderful at this gig. Well, now that shows people that you have credibility. You have validity as a candidate because the current office holder thinks that you can do this. So, sure, of course. Again, first-time candidates, much more important than incumbents. Incumbents have a track record. Incumbents have their own slate of accomplishments that they can rely on to demonstrate whether they're good on the issue or not. Endorsements can also come with some exposure, media exposure. Some unions still send out newsletters. Now, it may be an email newsletter or something today, right? A digital newsletter rather than the old, send it out in the actual post office, but some still do that even. And if they're going to publish in the newsletter their list of preferred candidates for each office and your name's on that list, now you have prospective voters seeing your name in a friendly setting, and they're going to, that's a name ID hit. Name ID hits are essential. Name ID is indispensable when you are running for office. That helps. The NRA still does American Rifleman magazine, right? When that comes out, there's a card in there for each state of who their endorsed candidates are for state rep, state senator, governor, whatever. And your name's on that list, boy, that helps, because now, hundreds of thousands of people in your state are going to see that you are endorsed by the pro-gun organization. That's pretty cool, right? That's a name ID hit. That's validity for you on that particular issue, etc. And you didn't have to pay for that exposure. When you take out an ad in the newspaper, which talking about Stone Ages, or you take out an ad on the radio, or you do a streaming ad, those all cost money. That's paid media. What we're talking about here is earned media. That's very different. You don't have to write a check for this. You just have to be good on the issue, engage with the single issue groups or the prominent members of the public in order to get their public support. And then you can reap the benefits of it by earned media. Really, really cool. Some single issue groups will even do turnout vote efforts. That's typically more often done by county parties, state parties, etc. But some single issue groups will also do get out the vote efforts. And if you're endorsed by them, the more of their people that show up and they know that you're endorsed, the more support, the more votes you're going to get. And that's helpful because they're obviously pushing their members to go vote, right? They don't want to push opposition. They push their members to vote, and their members have been informed that you are the guy. Now that helps. What else? Oh, let's talk about timing. So there are early endorsements and there are late endorsements. Early endorsements, 6, 9, 12 months before the election. This is where that whole freezing out your adversary really comes into play. If you can lock down some prominent endorsements early on in the cycle, one, it could help to scare some people off. Like if you're the NRA endorsed candidate, who wants to run against you? At least if, in say a Republican primary, or maybe you get the pro-life endorsement, whatever the local pro-life group is, the Right to Life, whatever. You lock that endorsement up 6, 9 months ahead of time. It's gonna be awful tough to beat you, right? So that whole freezing out your adversary really comes into play with the early endorsements. The other advantage in early endorsements is that you get that endorsement prior to going to print with your literature pieces. So now your lit pieces can include endorsed by the NRA, endorsed by your local sportsman's club, endorsed by, Mayor so-and-so, whatever it is, right? And you can include that on your lit piece. So now for the percentage of people who actually read the lit pieces, which is not as high as you think it is, by the way, but there are some who do. And the ones who read it will go, oh, wow, this guy's endorsed by the NRA, and the mayor thinks he's great. And what? Now you've got this list of endorsements. It gives validity to you, right? And by having that endorsement early enough before press time, now your lit pieces show it's like a series of badges, right? Look at all these people, all these organizations that support Jane Doe's candidacy. Jane Doe's going places. She's for real, right? But what about late endorsements? Late endorsements still help. In some ways, that can help a bit more in that an endorsement that comes out close to Election Day. Now, depending on where you are, maybe you only vote on Election Day. My state of Ohio has about a month of early voting, early in-person voting, and absentee voting. So in order for a late endorsement to really matter, it can't come too late, right? If it comes, the week before the election, a significant chunk of the electorate's already cast their ballots in early in-person and absentee voting. That doesn't work. But let's say you get an endorsement 5 weeks before the election, a week before early voting starts. Now the advantage here is these members of the public, these potential voters, are starting to think about, who am I going to vote for dog catcher or for state rep or whatever, governor, whatever. And they're thinking about it, and then they hear that there's an endorsement that just come out. Hot off the presses, right? And oh, wow, gee, next week we can go vote. Who'd they say? Oh, Jane Doe. Oh, I thought Jane Doe was going somewhere. All right, interesting. And, it's another name ID hit. It's validity to your campaign, and it can show some momentum, right? You're coming down the stretch. You're in the closing weeks of the campaign, and bam, you rack up a big endorsement. That can really help with the momentum. And look, everybody wants to be on the right side. It's human nature, right? We're kind of tribal in that regard. We want to be on the winning team, right? And yes, we make decisions based on issue stances, and yes, we make decisions based on the name we know, but we also make decisions based on who we think our neighbors are going to vote for, right? We don't want to be the odd man out, and so if it's a dog catcher or township trustee, something like that maybe the average voter doesn't know, frankly, enough about, they may go, oh, gee, it seems like everybody's getting on the Jane Doe campaign. I guess I should too, right? And so that's where late endorsements can really come in handy. Now, I must caution you, your election strategy as a candidate must not be all about endorsements. It's got to be about you. If it's all about endorsements, that's a very weak campaign, in my humble opinion. You need to be a valid candidate in your own mind. You need to have perfectly good reasons to be in that office that you're seeking to govern. Otherwise, what are we doing here? You can't just be the creation of a committee, right? So in that regard, I think a lot of people overvalue endorsements. They think if enough people endorse me, I'll just win. And I don't think that's true. There's a lot more to campaigning than that. There's knocking on doors, there's putting up yard signs, there's sending out lit pieces, there's voter targeting, digital ads, streaming ads, fundraisers, all kinds of things involved in a campaign. And a well-executed campaign will include some strategy on how we pursue endorsements. And of course, once we get those endorsements, answering the question, okay, so now what? So you got an endorsement. Donald Trump comes out and endorses you. Cool. What are you going to do with that? The NRA endorses you. Great. What are you going to do with that? If the answer is nothing, all you have is that bare minimum, you froze out your adversary. You froze out your opponent. But you could do more with it. And here's the thing. If you lose, you're going to take a bigger hit than the person that endorsed you, right? The person that endorsed you, guess we got that one wrong. Swing and a miss. Or, can't win them all, right? Well, you lost. So this is why I say don't believe that enough endorsements automatically carries you over the finish line, because it does not. Even if you get a lot of really great endorsements, you, as the candidate and your campaign committee, still has to do something with those endorsements in order for it to be valid and useful. Again, I am Doug with Tusk Consulting, tuskconsulting@gmail.com, tuskconsulting@gmail.com, and we will see you in the next one.